Thank you. Thank you for the nice meditation, too. So, there is, the title of my message today is The Big Gap. And I heard this snippet from Dr. Phil, and so I'm stealing it and using it in a spiritual way. And I think it'll be interesting. But this is what he said. There is a big gap between what you think you have and what you have. And when he said this, he was actually speaking about relationships and how we fill in the gaps between things that we want and what is the reality of the situation. And he said, and this is kind of a paraphrase of the whole thing, but it's like looking at the stars and seeing the Big Dipper. You have to connect the dots in order to make it the Big Dipper. In your relationship, you might say, well, he's nice looking. He has a car, and he said I'm pretty, and then you fill in the rest with whatever it is that you think you want to hear or know, right? Yeah, guys, you do that too, I'm sure. But this creates a big gap in reality. And today we're going to look at the gaps in our lives, and we're going to see how this works with our spiritual journey too, what kind of gaps we have in our spiritual journey, and how it affects us on our spiritual journey. But we're going to begin with, of course, our statements of truth together, everyone. I am a child of God. I am deserving of it in my life. I am accepting my good now. So what is the big gap? And what kind of gaps do we have in our lives? Are the gaps in our work or careers? Do we settle for jobs because we think that's the only job we can get, or that's the best pay? We don't want to give up that salary. And maybe we're doing it just because we don't want to change what we're doing. Do we settle for that? And we fill in the gaps. We say, oh, well, I don't really like my job, but I'm getting lots of money, so hey, it's okay, whatever happens in the middle. Yeah, we do that, don't we? And maybe we can't even find the job that we want. And we're not there to that place of success, and we say, oh, it's because I don't have the job I want that I'm not experiencing success. Well, that's a huge gap. There's your cubicles for you. So are the gaps even maybe perhaps just in our thoughts and in our actions and in our words? And this is when our thoughts and actions aren't in alignment. We think one thing and we do another. Anybody ever do that? Yeah? This is when there is incongruence and it's running rampant in our lives to the point where it's affecting our spiritual journey. We have such a gap between truth and the truth that we know in our soul and the reality that we're experiencing, that we just have this mishmash of life going on that we can't even really truly experience. We're unsure, we feel less than, and all those things come forth because of this big gap. Well, this is a gap. And it's because we don't have truth. So what do we do about these gaps? Well, this is a time of Lent. Everybody realizes that, right? And Jesus went away from the people to be alone with himself, to be alone with his thoughts and his words and his actions. And he went to the desert, to this isolated place. And what happened for him is that he discovered this deep, sacred connection with God. He became one with God. And he was tempted, and he was alone, and he was distraught. And he could have easily gone to that place of just living in the gap, couldn't he have? But he didn't. He contemplated and went to that place of meditation, that place of oneness. And when that happened for him, there was no longer a gap. The gap was gone. He was one with God, one with the Father. And metaphysically, I don't like to use the word Father because I don't like to use descriptive words for God or for the universe or for life or whatever you want to call it from the feminine and masculine aspect. But when we look at Father metaphysically, this is the definition from Fillmore. There is a relationship with God into which we can enter where he seems closer than breathing and nearer than the hands and feet. When we enter into this relationship, we become acutely aware of God as a living presence, and we are lifted up by God's love. In this consciousness, we are able to say, as Jesus did, Father. It kind of turns that masculine, doesn't it? It no longer feels like a masculine word. It feels like that oneness of God that we want to experience. And when Jesus was in this state, he knew that he could refuse any temptations that were out there. He knew that he was not going to settle for anything less than good in that moment. He could walk away from anything, and he stood in truth, that capital T truth that we're talking about today. And this example applies to our lives too, because we can use this time of Lent to give up those negative thoughts, those negative words, those negative actions, and become in that alignment with real truth. We can give up all those negative elements in our lives and follow the capital T truth, and that's where the gap closes and we are one with God. That capital T truth too, I want to define that a little bit for you, because that's when you know that God is in your life. And it might happen in that nanosecond, that whatever it is that happens, and you go, whoa, that's an aha moment, or that really happened. That's where we experience God. And what we want to do is try to experience that more in our lives, to make it not just a nanosecond. So in the example from Dr. Phil, when he was talking about how in our own imagination, that we create those images and we wish to experience by filling in the gap with all the stuff we think we want or need in life, my first thought was our relationship with God. And even when I say our relationship with God, right away it starts to make me think that we're talking about this physical presence of God. And we're not. We're not. We interact with God on a daily basis, and maybe a moment-by-moment basis if we're lucky. But God is not a physical presence. God is not a being standing here in front of us. And once we get that out of our head, it's easier to go to that place of oneness, that place of idea of the oneness and our consciousness being linked together and moving forward. Charles Fillmore gives us this from Keep a True Lent. Man has formed in his mind a far-off God who talks to him from some high mountain in invisible space. By thus looking afar for his God, he ignores the spark of divinity shining in his own being. And so, where are you looking for God? Do we turn within to that spark of divinity that we know is within us and use that for our place of beingness? Are we turning within to that spark of divinity that is there, that wants to shine, that wants to be brilliant, that wants to be successful, that wants to be intelligent, that wants to be all of those things we wish to have in our lives that we try to fill in the gap with, when we know that they're all right here within us, and all we have to do is get into that place of expression to find them. And this is where we build our relationship with God, if you want to call it a relationship. But what are you expecting out of that relationship with God? Are you still thinking like you're sitting here talking to your best friend going, hey, God, I don't understand why this isn't happening? Are you running around trying to fill in that gap of who you are with all the stuff you think you need out there in the physical sense? Because again, once we take away the physical sense of God, then that means we have to take away the physical sense of ourselves, right? We no longer see that I have curly hair or brown eyes, or that you have blue eyes or whatever. No, we see the essence of the Christ within ourselves, that spark of divinity, and we see it in each other, and that changes everything. And that's where we want to be, and that's where we establish that relationship with our Creator, and we co-create with this power and this energy, and we bring forth into expression all that is us, all that is there that's wanting to fill in that gap. So are we willing to be one and truly be in that place of expressing truth and be one with God? I heard one yes. Should I re-ask the question? Are we willing to be at one with God and be that expression of capital T truth?
Yes.
Yay! But maybe you enter this relationship thinking that you only have to connect the dots and you fill in with whatever it is that you want to fill in with. Well, Fillmore gives us this from Jesus Christ Heals, his text. There is a wide gap between the intelligence that moves to an appointed end under the impulse of divine energy. That's kind of like a pause. And that which knows the thoughts and desires of the divine mind and cooperates with it in bringing about the ends of a perfect and healthy creation. So I'm going to dissect this a bit. This is the only quote in all of Fillmore's writings that he uses the word gap, which I thought was, I didn't know that when I came up with the message. But I thought it was important because he does use the word wide gap, that big gap that we have. And if you look at how this sentence reads, there is a wide gap between the intelligence that moves to an appointed end under the impulse of divine energy. So let's stop it right there. So that spark of divinity that we have within ourselves that we can easily recognize, you know, we can take that energy and go forth and still go forth and create all the things we think we want to have or need. Right? Because the divine idea comes through us and we get to choose if we're going to let our will be the one to push it forward or allow God's will. So that first part of the statement is saying there's a big difference between, you know, just taking that spark of divinity with us and going around going, oh yeah, I know my spark of divinity, so I'm going to live it. You know, and still do whatever you want to do. And the difference between that and that which knows the thoughts and desires of divine mind and cooperates with it in bringing about the ends of a perfect and healthy creation. That's when we know that spark of divinity is there, and we stay connected to that spark of divinity, stay connected to that oneness of God, and then we go forth and put that into action. We stay in alignment with that divine idea, and we know that all that's coming forth and all that's going forward is good, and only good, and for the highest good for all. And that's a big difference. So once we move into this awareness of the difference, and we start living from that second part, we start shrinking that gap. In fact, if we live from that second part of that statement, the gap is gone, just as Jesus made the gap be gone. There is no longer a gap. Our consciousness is one with God, and we are expressing that. Man, the pictures are so much better with this new PowerPoint projector, aren't they? It's like, whew! But this is when we can know beyond knowing. That idea that you know something and you know it beyond knowing that it is true, that it is the capital T truth, and that it is working in our lives. And you know what? That happens, when that happens, we see the abundance in all that there is. And we know that all of our needs will be met, and truth will be the ruling factor in our lives. For example, let's look at money. How many people struggle with their finances? How many people stress over their finances? Yeah? All right. Well, looking at the world around us, we can lay out some dots as far as money goes, can't we? We can make one of the dots up here the idea of lack. You know, that we think we don't have enough money for everything, right? And we can hold on to that idea, and it can make us think that we are less than in other areas, because it creates another dot, another spot that we're connecting to that's saying, oh, I don't have enough money, that means I'm not good enough for this, or I can't go do that because I don't have the money, or I don't see what's going on because I don't have the money, or I can't. I've heard people even say, which this just blows my mind, and please, if you've ever said this, it's okay, I'm not beating you up, I'm just saying, I've heard people say this, I can't go to church because I don't have the money for the offering. Please don't ever think that that's a reason to stay home from church, because we are here as a family, and we are here for each other. And the whole idea of those dots of lack have got to be eradicated. We can no longer go to that false belief that there's anything in lack, because God lives in the abundance of all there is. Look at the trees. They're starting to get leaves. How many people know how many leaves are on a tree? Right. Nobody knows, do you? No. And even on this tree, you can't even count the leaves on the tree, can you? Because they're in abundance. It's a beautiful sign for us to see how much is out there for us to incorporate into our lives and bring forth. The divine ideas are plethora, just like the leaves on the trees. So another dot could be the bottom line, you know. You total all that up and you think, oh, I don't have enough to pay my bills, yeah? And that this is all there is. I don't know what I'm going to do. But we can't think that way. We can't go to that because we know the abundance of God. And it takes that change in thinking. It takes the capital T truth to fill in the gap. You saw the other picture where we had that big gap in there. Now we no longer have that gap. Now, I'm going to tell myself, you know, in our house, I don't pay the bills. I'll admit it. You know, I don't care if I pay them or not. Warren's job is to pay the bills, right? He's the finance guy. He's got an accounting degree. Hey. Why should I deal with it? But you know what's kind of funny is, because I'm the one in the house that always knows that there's more than enough for everything. More than enough to pay all the bills, to do everything we need, because I'm not looking from that place of the bottom line. I'm not looking at the checkbook register. I'm not looking at any of the bills that come in. And you know what? Sure, you know, we all have to do our due diligence. We can't go around charging up all the cards and thinking it's all going to be, you know, copacetic. No, but I am filling in the gap with the capital T truth. The truth is that there's abundance of money everywhere. You know, when we moved here, we had our house in Kansas City, and we were paying a mortgage still on that house. We were paying the insurance, the taxes, the utilities, you know, and paying for any repairs that needed to be done on it. That, you know, somebody came in, looked at the house, and said, well, we would buy the house except for the faucet doesn't turn the right way, or whatever it was. Anyway, and we came here, and we took a pay cut, and it was tough. And Reverend Warren would get frustrated, and he'd say, oh, there's not enough money to pay the bills. There's not enough money for anything. But you know, the thing is that we never starved. We weren't on the streets. We survived all that time. We even have bought a house since then. And the house in Kansas City sold. And my point is that I was always coming from that place of, no, you know, there is enough money. There's always enough money. And it all gets paid one way or another if you do your due diligence. And if you come from that place, mainly if you come from that place of closing that gap with the capital T truth and know that your good will come forth. Yesterday we had women's group and we were doing treasure mapping and so vision boards. And so I said, you know, one of the things that was going to come for me is I wanted a rocking chair for my front porch. And my front porch might not look that big, but now that I got a rocker on there, it looks really big. But anyway, I told everybody at the group, I said, well, somebody's going to give me a rocking chair. I went home, and Reverend Warren had bought me 2 rocking chairs, and they're on my porch. And I didn't know that he had bought them. So you see, you never know where it's going to come from or how it's going to come about. You know, you just have to be open to that idea of the abundance of all there is. And Jesus tells us this from John 15:15. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the Lord is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. And remember that Father metaphysically means that living presence of God within us. And this quote can free us from any burdens that we have put on ourselves. It lets us know that we can know the truth because we can know what we are doing. So what is it else in your life that diverts you from living the truth that you know? What is it that you're filling that gap with that is keeping you from experiencing truth? And you know what? That question can only be answered by each of you. Only you guys know the answer. I can't tell you the answer. I can give you a message to open the portal to your soul to explore what it is that it is the answer for you. But you have to take that within yourself and find that. And perhaps part of it is because we're not living up to our potential. It's hard to live up to your potential. And from the book Living to Your Potential from Azim Jamal and Harvey McKinnon, they suggest the more you give of yourself, the more you find of yourself. I love that, don't you? And what we are truly desiring in life is to find ourselves, because once we find ourselves, we find that relationship with God. We find that oneness, we find that truth. And when we look at ourselves through the lens of lack, in any manner, in any part of our life, bless you, we do not live up to our potential. We are not living from that place where we're connected, knowing that God is in our lives. And we miss out on a whole lot. You see, our potential lays waiting within us and can be revealed to us by giving to others, when we are in service to others. Another quote I loved from this book is from Rumi, a 13th century Persian mystic, who said, he told of a man who walked past a beggar and asked, "Why, God, do you not do something for these people?" And God replied, "I did do something. I made you." Yeah, and when Rumi wrote these words, he was addressing our ability to choose what we do, our ability to reach our potential. And if we're living in that place of truth, we're going to go out and be there for others, be in service to others, give to others, do what we need to do. But we have to find our own potential. We have to find our true calling. We have to be in that place and state of mind where we know that God is in the midst. And that can make a difference in our lives. That's when we can live by the fifth principle and say we are making a difference not only in our lives, but in the lives of others. And that changes everything because we expect more of ourselves when we live from that place. We discover new feelings of self-worth. In fact, there's even stats on that. That if you are giving to others, if you are volunteering, that it helps your self-esteem. I mean, we need to teach this to our kids. You know, think about how that could boost their self-esteem. By volunteering and giving to others, you build your own self-esteem. We can also begin to tap into knowing our true gifts and our talents, and here's some of the benefits from doing it too. New relationships, a feeling of security, jobs, good health, a sense of empowerment, pride and accomplishment, happiness, peace and love. Who doesn't want those expressed in their lives? I want them expressed in my life, don't you? Yes. And the idea is that if we just give of ourselves, give of our time, give of our energy, give of our talents, that we will be filling in that gap and we will be living our full potential and we will reap these benefits. So Fillmore gives us a little bit more about the idea that sometimes we get detoured from this truth. The mind of man is constantly projecting thought energies or waves through brain cells into the ether or space element in which we live. Reverend Warren talks about that in the meditation about our energy going out into the ethers and that race consciousness. That's the idea of all of our consciousness together. Every person lives in an environment of radiant energy that circulates through the cells of his organism like bees in a hive. That's that spark of divinity we're talking about, that idea that it is within you. Ordinarily, we cannot see the radiations of the mind, but we almost universally feel them. When a discordant mind impinges upon our mind radiations, we instinctively shrink away. How many people have been around people that you walk up to them or they walk into the room and automatically you feel their energy and you're thinking, ugh, yes. I think we all have felt that at some time because we're in unity and we feel that energy, we know that energy, and we know that it's not comfortable. But we are radiantly happy in the presence of an exalted mind. And this is where we are with each other in this community. We're in this together in the idea of that energy of that exalted mind, and we feel that with each other. We feel comfortable, we feel at home, and we feel like we can share of ourselves and feel safe about it, don't we?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes. And it's this comfortable place, and when that happens, you feel the exhilaration of spirit coming out through you, don't you? Tell me you do, because that's what it's about. Yes. You should be all on fire. And you know what? We receive this when we give of ourselves to each other. And if you feel like this is your church home, is this your church home? Yeah? Your church family? Then I suggest you start sharing with each other. Share of yourself. If there's something you want to share with us, whether it's some kind of talent, some kind of gift, whatever idea you have, we want you to share it. Because that's going to build and just grow and create more things for people to enjoy and to learn about each other. And we've begun to see that here at Unity Church and Spiritual Center. We have begun to see people volunteer and more people step out in faith and truth and know that they can be here and be comfortable. We've had people, Todd came here from the beginning and just jumped in volunteering, and we didn't even know who he was, but he was being great. Everybody here that has been coming, it seems like, has been doing something that is bringing this source of energy and power and love that we know and we want to experience in our lives. That Love in Any Language event was huge for volunteers and people doing something and sharing of themselves. Excuse me. Hold on. But all of these teams that we have all of these teams bridge that gap. And we do it with each other, and we carry forth. And if any of these teams are calling you, go to their meetings, the brief meetings after church on Sunday, and find out what it's about. Or come to me and I can give you a little job description. We have job descriptions for all the places. And you'll see, on the PowerPoint of the announcements before service, some of the things that are opening up too. But all of these are always open for everybody to share. But this isn't the only way you can volunteer. You can volunteer by bringing forth your ideas of what it is you want to do. And we have several people that are going to be sharing some of their talents and some of their truth with us coming up. The women's retreat. Yeah, Russell is going to be doing something here that'll be good for us too. And I don't know when, and I haven't talked to him since before Christmas about it, but he's an attorney, so he's going to share some of his skills with us to learn something about living wills and some of that kind of stuff. And that's going to be coming up probably in the next month or so, after church on a Sunday. So we have people stepping forth wanting to share some of their ideas and some of their talents, and we want you all to feel comfortable doing that. Because we're building a community here that can give and receive in all the ways that can bless all of us. And we're filling that gap with truth. Now this Lenten season, I invite you to ask yourself some of these questions, take them to prayer, and see what reveals themselves to you. What are my dots in life? Are they my gifts, my time, my talent? And what am I willing to give and receive? And when I connect the dots, what am I forming? Is it my potential? Is it abundance? Is it a change in thought to bring about my highest good? And with what am I filling in the big gap? Is it God and truth, or all that other silly stuff? As a reminder of the good that is in abundance, I invite you to look up at the stars anytime you doubt. Look up at the stars and see them as a plethora of opportunities that wait for you to connect the dots for your highest potential, waiting to be filled with God and truth. Thank you for being here today. God bless.
Thank you, Reverend Francie. That was great. I'd like to thank y'all.